Hello and welcome to episode 18 of A Gamer Looks at 40. My name is Bill Tucker, and as I've been doing this show over the last few months, I've come to know some retro collectors. It's a fascinating world I know nothing about. I am not a collector. I don't have that gene in me. I don't have the bug. I have no room in my home. I have 2 children. They take up all the room with all the things. If you have kids, you understand the pain. It's real. I don't collect things. But as anyone can tell you, if they've spent any time in the retro gaming space, the hobby is in a strange place right now. Games are no longer something you collect for nostalgic reasons or for even personal reasons or even just to have something cool on the walls. Games have become the new hot collectible, like baseball cards or Coca-Cola memorabilia or Beanie Babies. No offense if you collect Beanie Babies. That's just a triggering thing that just came to brain. Apologies. But they get graded by agencies, sold at auctions, and fetch tens of thousands of dollars. They've gone beyond collectibles. They're commodities. As a quick experiment, I did a search online for a copy of Maniac Mansion on NES. I'm playing that game right now for an episode of MageCast and thought, hey, what would it be like to play this on original hardware? On average, a loose copy of Maniac Mansion would run me around $30. That's half the price of a day one AAA title. Right now, I can buy the entire BioShock collection, and that's BioShock 1, 2, and Infinite, with the DLC for $12 on Steam. But there's reasons for that, right? Supply and demand, a limited number of copies. I can download BioShock Infinite a million times if I wanted to. There's no end to that. There's only a certain amount of Maniac Mansion NES games out there. It's that the math seems to make sense. But when you get into the world of $1,000 consoles and graded games in plastic cases, graded by companies no one has heard of before 2 years ago, we're getting into the world of the weird and the extreme. What's going on here? On this episode of A Gamer Looks at 40, we examine the world of retro collecting from 2 perspectives. On side A, I chat with 4 retro collectors about their favorite pieces, the stories behind them, and what drives them to amass these impressive libraries of games and consoles. And on side B, I chat with the owner of a small chain of retro game shops on his perspective of the current state of the retro collecting landscape. As the person selling the titles and sometimes setting the prices, his thoughts and opinions may surprise you. Time to settle down with a stack of old games and carefully clean the Dorito dust from the cartridge's contact pins as we dive into this double-long episode of A Gamer Looks at 40. Gotta catch 'em all, the dueling sides of retro collecting. Starting us off on our journey through retro gaming is Andy, also known as Love Retro BTW on Twitter. He is the gaming and community director for Stand Up to Cancer. He is a great podcaster. He does a show on Saturdays called Cafe BTW on Twitch, and an all-around good guy who is a part of a lot of great causes on the internet, and really a good dude to talk to. He shares with us some of his collection, what drives him to collect, especially one system in particular. So I'd like to kind of touch a bit on your collecting because you are a big collector, especially in the Sega Saturn realm.
Yep.
First off, kind of what drives you to collect? Because for me personally, I don't have that gene in me. And I respect people who do. And I've always interested like, man, what is the driving force to like acquire these systems and these games and just what drives you to do that?
I would say it's really simple, really. Rebuilding my childhood, because I made a lot, back, and I talked about this. I do a lot of TikTok videos. You can follow me at Cafe BTW on TikTok, where I show my collection stuff and I talk about collecting. I guess what drives me is that my mom threw out a lot of my old games when I was in college. And it was like I came home and like literally all these games we acquired over the years, like you heard my history. I had a colorful history in gaming and a lot of that wasn't saved. But what's funny is that my Sega Saturn collection was one of my surviving pieces of the whole thing, which is my connection to the Saturn because I was lucky enough to get it. Do you remember the Wiz? Nobody Beats the Wiz.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
That is where I bought my Sega Saturn.
Nice.
Is that
very
funny?
good? That's
So
great.
yeah, and it's rebuilding my childhood. So what ended up happening is that only a few things survived my original collection, which is sad. But the ones that I did, it's not just my Sega Saturn. Like I have a few other trinkets that survived, but dude, a majority of stuff is gone. So about 10 years ago, I started like casually collecting, and that's what I do. I've been casually collecting for 10 years. With a focus on Sega Saturn games, believe it or not, and Sega Saturn anything. Like I have Sega Saturn Cherry Coke Pogs that I found, which is freaking cool, right?
That
and
is super cool.
They're only like $2, and I found them. Like
Nice.
it's great. So anything like that does. So the answer is rebuilding my childhood. Really connects me back to that.
Next up, Jeremy, also known as Ducks in Disguise on Twitter, shares some of his adventures in the world of retro collecting.
So I started collecting again, I would say about 10 years ago now. There was a time when so from ages question mark to about 15, video games were my life. And then at that point, I got a guitar and I started focusing on creative pursuits. And that lasted up until, like I said, about 10 years ago. And of course, I still do the creative stuff, but I wanted to reconnect with that childhood. That was the catalyst. Not so much the memories and the childhood themselves, but the games that I played back then. I have a lot of good, just good feelings attached to those games. Like Super Mario Brothers 3, which is my favorite game of all time. There's just something that feels good about playing that game. It's like a comfort zone for me. So that's why I got back into it, was to sort of reconnect with all those old experiences that I remember being so much fun from back in those days, and that was really sort of the catalyst for me to start getting back into collecting. I've always had a huge appreciation and love for Nintendo, so I picked up an NES and a few cartridges, and now we're here.
And where is here? Like, what's your collection look like today?
Yeah, so right now I've collected all of the Nintendo hardware with the exception of an original Famicom and a original model DS.
Okay.
But everything else is represented, even the Virtual Boy, the Virtual Headache. I've got one of those. That's one of my proud pieces.
Nice.
So yeah, all of the Nintendo stuff. We've got about 500 physical games in there. There's a little bit of PlayStation, so PS1, PS2, some Sega stuff, Dreamcast, Genesis, Sega CD. I just picked up the Sega CD. I'm very excited to see what I missed out on when my dad made that excellent call to get a Super Nintendo.
Absolutely. You kind of mentioned this a bit when you start talking about collecting, but I want to ask the pointed question: what drives you in your quest for finding the new items for your collection? What's the driving force? And you've mentioned connecting with your childhood. Is that the main one? Is that kind of the central focus?
So that is part of it. Just collecting those games that I remember from back then, and then of course anything that I had heard of from back then that I never got a chance to play. There were some really good stuff that I just didn't get a chance to play back then, like Super Castlevania. I never got a chance to play that. So to be able to regain that one again, that was really the main driving force behind me wanting to collect again, but also just reconnecting with the hobby and the industry and the people that also collect. It's a really great community. So while initially, yes, it was to, reconnect with childhood, now that there's, one, I'm enjoying the games. I really enjoy collecting and playing the games, but two, there's this amazing community that it's really fun to see what people are finding, what they like to play, and their shelves and collections and things like that. I really just love the culture around it now. So so that's like what I really enjoy about the hobby, playing the games and then being in the community around it. But as far as what I want to pick up next, it's all those things that I'd always heard of or never got to play, or sequels to series that I loved and never got to play. That's really what I'm looking for these.
That's cool. That's cool. And do you find that playing it on original hardware, like an emulation, can how do you feel about like emulation? Because you could play a lot of these things, you know, on your computer with a right. But is there something different about playing it on original hardware for you?
Yeah, I have nothing against emulation. I've always said emulation is great. Piracy is bad, but emulation is great. I think emulation is a great way to preserve gaming history. There are so many of these cartridges that, without insane people like me and also, emulation, these things would be lost to history. They people simply wouldn't play them. I would rather have them, find a ROM or buy a digital one and play it through emulation than just lose the experience forever, or all of the work that goes into these things, because games are not just a simple piece of media. They're a collection of media presented as a complete work. So to see any game disappear is very, very sad. So huge on emulation. I do support it. But there is something to be said for original hardware. Emulation isn't perfect. You will have small glitches and things like that. There's something about the original creaking plastic of the controllers. The NES controller is one of the most uncomfortable things you can possibly hold in your hands. At the same time, it's incredibly familiar and comfortable in just that nostalgia aspect. So there is that added benefit. I also love the label art and the box art. When I look at my shelf, I do have a few where it's just, rows of my favorite games facing out so I can see the labels. That almost works as a photo album for me. When I see that cover art or those box art, it immediately triggers memories to playing games with my dad or my brother or whatever. So there's that aspect of it too that I really like. The art itself on the game or the box is really, it's a very cool and important part of the experience for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I can. That makes a lot of sense. I'm not a collector, so I don't have that gene in me, I guess. But I can definitely see how it would be like pictures on a wall, like photos on a wall, and being able to kind of look at that and just like have those pleasant memories trigger is really nice. That's an interesting way of approaching it for sure. Next up is a brand new friend to the show, George, also known as G to the Next Level on Twitch and on Twitter and on YouTube and basically any place there's a screen for you to view. The man is out there doing his thing. He is a YouTube creator, an excellent Twitch streamer, writer, Sega and Sonic crazy fan, and I am just reading from his Twitter bio. That's all I'm doing. But the man is really cool, super nice guy, and a really fun follow, especially on Twitch. He's on there all the time, doing his thing and doing it well. He shares with us his love for retro collecting, how he got into it, and some of his favorite pieces. So let's talk a little bit about your collecting. So you did mention at the open that you have all of the retail available Genesis games. Do you have other Sega? Do you collect other Sega stuff, or did you kind of stick to the Genesis to kind of get that complete? And because I do know you do a lot of collecting and trading. You were at Classic Game Fest about a month and change ago, which was very cool. I saw you wheeling and dealing on the floor, which was neat.
Oh yeah, Classic Game Fest was nuts, man. It was awesome.
You were
Can't wait for
busy.
next year.
You were busy, man. You had a lot of customers up there buying, and I'm not sure they were selling or trading. I don't know any of that world, which is why I love talking about it to people who do. So, what else are you collecting right now?
Well, as far as collecting goes, in the last 2 years, especially this year, now that I've made some adjustments to do both YouTube and Twitch and whatnot full time for the moment, I've actually kind of shifted my collecting goals. To where I used to be all about, okay, well, I want to have a complete collection of every Sega console. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get a complete collection of all of them. But throughout the years, I've kind of realized that, I kind of want to stick it to either like little small collections of different things that I like. So like say, like I have almost all of the Sonic the Hedgehog games that have been released. I'm only missing a handful of them now. I'm missing Sonic's Game World on the Pico, the American version. I have the Japanese one. I'm missing Tales of Sky Patrol, and there's a variant of Sonic 06 that I just learned existed that I had no idea. It came in a 3-pack with Viva Pinata Party Animals and Shrek the Third on the 360. It was made for the Children's Miracle Network, and those portion of it went to the Children's Miracle Network. And the third game that came with it was Sonic 06. I had no idea this existed, and I want it in my life.
Wow, that's crazy.
But it's those things now. Like I recently a couple months ago, because the Sega Saturn is another Sega system I love dearly. I kind of had to sit in front of my collection, and I just kind of realized, and I was just like, I love this, but there are other things that I want to do with my life, and I don't have as much of an emotional attachment to this as I do with, say, like the Genesis or the 32X, because I also have a complete US 32X collection as well.
Oh, wow.
32X and 32X CD. I basically have both of them. Sega CD and Dreamcast and Saturn, I love them, but I don't have nearly the same amount of attachment. So I did thin out some of my collection on both of those and just really kept to the ones that mean the most to me. And that's really where I come down to collecting now. I really want to collect what means the most to me. It used to be where it's just like, okay, well, if I plan on doing some sort of material on it, whether it be a Twitch stream or YouTube video, write an article or something like that about it. But now it's just about, hey, does this have any emotional attachment? If it doesn't, then there are other means that I can play it. But there are times that, and I still do want to do at least a fair share of collecting. Like the big thing that I want to do now is like I want to get all the games from like maybe a certain mascot, because that's one of my things. I love mascot platformers. Sonic, go figure, right? Like I absolutely love and adore mascot platformers. So there are some franchises that I want to own all the games of that. Like I want to own all the Klonoa games. I want to own all the Earthworm Jim games. I want to own all the Bubsy games. Yes, I said that. Like they're all different mascots. Like I have an entire YouTube series that I'm planning about it called Mascot Mania. Like I love and adore mascot platformers. So those kind of collections, like little things like that, or like say I want to own like all the different versions of this one particular game or something like that. That's what I'd like to do. Like Battletoads. I've been on a Battletoads kick like this last week. Yeah. And I just like I want to own all the Battletoads games, and I have almost all of them. I mentioned it on Twitter, and somebody called it out. I was like, that's the one I'm missing, because there was a version for the Amiga. It's like, there's a version for the Amiga. It's like, that's the one I'm missing.
Wow. Yeah. That's cool. Next up, Ryan, also known as Retro Game Brews on Twitter and on Twitch, shares with us what drives him to collect retro video games. What about collecting really connects with you? Now, obviously, you're still doing it, and of course, on Story Mode, you talk about some of your exploits in collecting. Sometimes when you, especially when the topic of how much things cost these days, and the market and resellers and all that. Right. But what about that hunt for that new find? Where does that come from? You think? Because that's the thing I don't have. Like I want to remove things constantly. I have no collection in me. That's just not a thing I have. So where do you think that kind of comes from?
And you know what? I think it's just very much what we just covered here is the story behind it. There's a memory behind it. There's an adrenaline rush involved with finding something that is either, unexpected, rare, or just out of curiosity. There seems to be just this, dopamine dump as soon as I get a chance to go out there. And that's where I like going to places that normally you wouldn't be able to find video games. It's kind of off the beaten path. And that drive is what's always made collecting kind of fun for me. And, at the end of the day, again, I'm not the kind of person that needs absolutely everything. So I'm not looking to necessarily keep every item in my collection, but it's the things that I know that I want to play. So there's two parts to that, right? Where it's about shelf candy for sure. Definitely. Sure. And enjoy that. But I want to play them. That's the biggest caveat for me.
Well, I have an Odyssey 2 my friend gave me.
Nice.
That I don't have the RF thing to hook up to a TV I don't have. So it's just kind of sitting there. So I need to figure out how to turn it into a machine that I can play on something I own. So that's the extent of what I have.
Gotcha.
He showed up one day, it's a few months ago. He's like, "Hey, I've been carrying this around for 6 months. I got it out of my mom's house, and it was this Odyssey 2 with like 9 or 10 games, and the boxes and manuals are all there, and
love it.
It's pretty neat, but it's cool to see this old thing, and this, like you said, the stories behind it are what's kind of neat. So
for sure.
how many pieces are in your collection right now?
Oh man, I will say this. I know that there are plenty of people who have way more stuff than I do. But,
That's fine. Yeah, I'm just curious though. Yeah, what's ballpark? Yeah.
So probably 150 Super Nintendo games. Probably the same for regular Nintendo. Got 75 Atari games. Probably 50 or 60 in television games. 70 to 100 Sega Genesis games, a lot of those complete in box. And the thing for me with my collection is that I'm not there trying to get absolutely everything that's out there. I don't need 12 copies of Magic Darts on the NES. That's right. It's only the stuff I think I really want to play. So I'll pick something up, I'll play it for a while. If I don't like it, I'll use it as trade bait for something else.
That's pretty neat. It's interesting. What would you say, without this turning into like collection cribs?
I gotcha.
Again, we're old gentlemen, so we kind of get that reference. I don't think any of the young bloods would. What would you say your most valuable possession or valuable item in your collection is, and what is the most valuable to you?
Gotcha. Okay. So probably the most valuable piece in my collection is a copy of Bubble Bobble Part 2 for the NES. And it comes with a almost mint manual. And
Wow.
there's actually a little bit of a story behind that. So,
Okay, go for it.
my cousin, who I just got back into retro collecting. It was something that I was starting to ask people around. Because like the first thing you do when you start collecting is you ask your family. You say, hey,
Right.
you know, anybody got games? I'm really into this. And got contacted by my cousin because at his work, they had created basically from scratch a NES in a arcade cabinet. So they built all the wood on it. They threw in like a CRT television and then
Nice.
split off some of the controllers to turn them into joystick and standard buttons. And he was like, I don't need this anymore. Nobody plays it. Do you want it? So I said, sure. So we went over there, and then much to my surprise, with that was a entire like 30-gallon Rubbermaid container with just all of these NES games.
Oh,
In fact,
wow.
it contained Mega Man 2 through 6, so I got 5 for free, which that was nice. And then there was probably 120 games. In there. So what I did is I went through a chronicle there, like these are the ones I want, these are the doubles, and ended up taking it down to a local retro shop who had that Bubble Bobble Part 2. I always had my eye on it. We would go in there all the time, and I kind of like, I want that, but the price tag on it's a little too expensive. So I walked in there that day and straight up traded for it. And
Wow.
yeah, I was pretty pleased. So basically got it for free, given, I mean, I probably could have gotten more value out of it, but it didn't matter to me because I was also helping out like a local shop. So
Yeah, this is like a perfect storm of goodness. You help someone clean out their attic, which
Right.
is great. You made sure a local game shop had 100 or because you said it was about 100 games or so you returned or,
Yep.
or
So
traded in.
yep.
So you stocked their shelves for the next 3 months, and then you got Bubble Bobble too. Is that a rare thing?
yes.
I don't.
Yeah.
It is.
So
Okay.
it was released in 1993, so it's probably one of the last
Oh,
games.
wow. Yeah.
So. Right now, if you go on price charting, it's probably north of $400.
Oh my god! I
Yeah.
can never get over how expensive these things are. I mean, supply and demand, I guess, but wow, that is
Right.
an extremely cool story. That's neat. So is that so that's obviously, I guess, is that the one that's the most meaningful to you personally? It sounds like it might be.
It is
no?
in a way. I think
Okay.
that just because of the kind of story behind it. I
Yeah,
would
the
say-
provenance, yeah.
Right, for sure. The other one that's kind of near and dear to my heart is I ended up getting an Atari 2600 Heavy Sixer. And
What is that? What is a heavy sixer?
so basically, before they had shipped off production over to Taiwan, they made a bunch of Ataris from the original back in '77 in Sunnyvale, California to distribute, right? And so the reason they call them the Heavy Sixer is because they are made from very much more heavy materials that's thicker plastic to it. So there is definitely a difference as far as weight is concerned. And also there's a difference as far as the look of it. Typical Atari 2600. So if you're looking at like the wood panels in the front, they're kind of like this angle, right? Kind of an obtuse angle on each side of it. Where with a Heavy Sixer, they're rounded. And it's difficult for me to kind of explain this over
Yeah,
this.
that's
Right.
fair.
But so years later after I got it, and in fact, I got it recognizing it was a heavy sixer, and went to a toy store where they had one.
Okay.
And they were asking like a regular Atari price for this, so I was pretty pleased to walk out with it.
Oh, wow. Now, could you recognize it right away? Like, oh,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
Because if you're familiar with what a heavy sixer looks like, it's distinct. It sticks
Okay.
out like a sore thumb.
That's so interesting. So that's cool. So what about that really connects with you?
So it's interesting because I played Atari. That was probably my first console that I ever touched as a kid. So my grandmother had an Atari in her basement, and I remember distinctly playing Keystone Capers on it. So there was like that instant connection. I loved video games. I probably wouldn't say that I definitely got into it, and probably until the 16-bit generation is like I'm hooked for life on this, but it was definitely a good start to that. And what I found out by going to Atari Age, they were doing this thing where they're like, everybody show us your serial number on your heavy sixer, which is kind of like, I don't know, like, Mr. Cool contest. And I had no idea, right? So I flipped it over, took a picture, and they're like, you realize that's the first print run of...
Wow.
Right. So
You got like an Atari 2600 of the first pressing. It's like getting a first pressing record of like Yellow Submarine. Like,
right.
That's really, really cool. That's cool. Next up, Jeremy shares with us a story of a classic game, one of my favorites, and the very interesting way he acquired it.
One of my proudest pieces, and one of the things I'm most proud of in the collection, is a complete in-box Game Boy, the original packaging and everything, but it has a really cool story behind it. So this local game store, I'm very blessed in my area to have several shops that are independently owned, and they focus on retro games and collectors.
That's cool.
So so I know the guy who runs the shop there pretty well, and this thing just came in and I was like, wow, that almost looks brand new. And he goes, yeah, let me tell you the story about this Game Boy. It was this little old lady brought it in, and she said, I don't play this anymore. Here you go. And inside that box is the headphones are still sealed. The link cable is still sealed.
Wow.
The only thing that was opened in there was the original batteries.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, the Game Boy is still in its plastic bag. The little Tetris cartridge with the thing is still in there. All the promotional cards, everything. So what she would do, she bought this to play Tetris. She loved Tetris. So she would take it out of the box, play it for an hour or whatever, and she would wipe it down clean, put it back in the bag, put everything back in the box as it was new, and it would sit there until the next time she would play it. And this went on for years until she brought it into the shop, and I was like, oh yeah, I'm taking that with me.
Yeah, that's do not pass go, do not collect $200.
Right.
Give it to me. Wow.
Yep.
What a story.
Yeah, that was another reason I was like, I want this just for the story.
Yeah, that's cool. That's kind of like
really cool.
the quote unquote the little old lady who drives the car, once a month, once a week to get groceries, and it's like brand new. A 15-year-old car is brand new still. She just took it out for Tetris, an hour at a time.
Yeah.
And what a cool little testament to the Game Boy, where you have somebody, again, an elderly lady playing Game Boy, because she wanted to play some Tetris. She enjoyed the game, and that's really cool. There's something very sweet about that. Part of the fun of learning about retro collecting for me are the stories. Like you've heard a few just now, and you're going to hear a few later on. Andy shares some more stories of how he acquired his collection and some of the personal pieces therein. Do you have any pieces of your collection that you would say are really personal to you? Like these, pieces that are just speak to you on a personal level?
Yeah, I have my original Super Mario NES, cartridge, and that just reminds me of me and my brother. Like, I have a fond connection with my brother, and I would say that game, I have the original Metroid on NES still in my hand, and I remember playing that, like, religiously and, like, loving it, I have my Mario Kart 64, I have my Super Mario 64, so what's interesting is a lot of, like, these, like, good ones, like I saved, but really my Sega Saturn collection is the most I have connected to, because what ended up happening is I got back from college, I found out my mom threw out my stuff, but I realized I hid my Sega Saturn collection behind my bed in like this weird like headrest, like my headboard had like a cabinet built into it, and everything was in there. So yeah, my collection, and I have a lot of the great games. Yeah.
Yeah, you literally scrolled it away. Like you you literally hit it from prying eyes or
without knowing, you know,
without knowing.
Yeah.
That's so funny. That's very cool.
I have a lot of like really valuable stuff. I have consoles. I have I think my collections in itself, like as a collective group, is valuable, you know?
Sure.
But those
sure.
are the standout ones, yeah.
No, definitely. That's really interesting. And again, you said that it sounds like, yeah, you said that you've been doing it for about 10 years now. So that's a long time to be acquiring these pieces, as you go and as you kind of just, and it sounds like you've done it kind of casually, just kind of seeing what's out there and picking it up if it's interesting.
Yeah, like I'm not afraid to buy games that, maybe they're not valuable, but maybe they bring a memory back to me, so
Sure.
that's the type of shopping I do. And I think it's more genuine, it's like I'm rebuilding my childhood. Oh, wait, that one's a little bit too much for me, but maybe I'll treat myself on a birthday, right? So like that's my thing. Every year I say I'm going to spend X amount of dollars on my birthday, and I do that. And that's when I splurge and go crazy on expensive games. But for the most part, man, I just like going and finding like crazy like games I remember. But I spend a good buck, but I don't get too crazy.
Right.
Don't get too crazy.
Also, just buy a game that looks fun. $5 if it's if you spend $5 in a game and you get an hour and a half of entertainment out of it. I mean, that's a deal. I think that's a pretty good
Absolutely.
time value kind of situation there. So it's very interesting. You have the same focus, and I think that's a healthy way of approaching collecting and kind of again acquiring these pieces.
Yeah, and I used to be I would say I was more of a like hardcore like comic collector. Like, and here's the thing, my comic books survived. So I have all my comic books from my childhood, which is interesting. But I would say that there came a point when I was collecting comic books and I had moved to LA and I was like broke. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I can't buy all these comic books every week. What am I doing?
You're living in LA.
I'm living in LA now. I got to get a freaking job and like do what I'm doing. So once I got more settled in, I started gearing towards, I left comic collecting again, and I really wanted to focus back on retro collecting, and it's been freaking awesome. But what's sad though now is that I was a part of those like 10 years ago, 5 years ago, as recent as 5 years ago, you could actually go find some games that were affordable that now are very pricey. Like the prices have changed, and the quality has dissipated. The quantity in stores is going down too.
It definitely is public opinion. Why is this copy of Donkey Kong $50? Well, because there's only so many out there in the world that are available for purchase. That doesn't excuse those out there who are really scalping, who are charging ridiculous prices for these things. That's a totally different story. I'd love to talk to people who do that. That is one of my goals on my whiteboard of shows I like to do. Actually talk to scalpers and say, hey,
sure,
what's going on, right? Like no judgment zone, but what's the story?
That'd be great.
Yeah. And so it's very interesting how that kind of the scene has changed, so to speak.
You should get them on and offer the anonymous side of it. Like let them just be anonymous and talk, That'd be great. Dude, I would love to hear that. Please.
Yeah. No, that's on my whiteboard of
awesome. I love that.
Of show ideas to talk to scalpers. Because I think that's, again, it's interesting. Just
totally.
That side of the world. Yeah. What would you say in your collection of Sega Saturn, or really anything on your collection right now would be like one of the most valuable? Obviously there's a monetary aspect to it, and of course the personal aspect. What would you say one of the rarer pieces that you have?
I won't say it's like super expensive, but I have a very nice copy of Panzer Dragoon, the original, which is like a pricey one, over $100 today.
Okay.
But my prized possession, my friend, is, I'll tell you, there's like three things. There's an unopened James Pond Genesis game I have, unopened. Okay. My unopened Perfect Dark on Nintendo 64.
Ooh, nice.
And then the crown jewel of my collection is an unopened Atari 2600 porn game that was released by Sears in 1982 or something.
Wait, what?
Yes, this does exist. It has two games in it, Beat 'em and Eat 'em and Lady in Waiting.
Oh.
And they're super rare. And I found one randomly, and I just had to buy it. I mean, I'd never seen them before. I only heard of them. So oddly enough, yes. I own a Atari 2600 unopened porn game that's very valuable.
That is really strange. I would love to know what the provenance on that is. Like how it, like who bought that? If it was something that was like in a just discarded by a retailer, they didn't sell it, or if somebody actually just bought it as a goof for like a friend during like a white elephant sale. Like, hey, here's a game for you, and it was never opened because the guy was like, oh, haha, very funny. I would love to know the provenance on that. That's really funny.
Yeah, that's a story. I just, listen, I'm not, it's not like I want to collect like video game porn games.
No, of course not.
Right. But I was just like so fascinated by it because I had heard of it. And it's one of those telltale stories in retro gaming when you hear of something that's so hard to find. And then when you see it physically in a store, you're like, whoa, that exists. Holy crap. There it is. A freaking porn game. But one game I've seen before is that a famous NES game, the like championship, like demo disc or whatever it was. Have you heard of that one?
Not the World Championship carts.
I think that's the one I'm thinking.
Oh,
of,
is it?
yes.
Okay, yeah, the World Championship. Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they're
definitely familiar.
So there's a comp. I mean, a retro video game store in Brooklyn called Video Games New York. And I had visited them over the summer. We went to New York. I visited back home, and he has a copy, the owner, and you could see it on display. I think those go for lots of money, man.
Yeah, it's a chunk of change for sure. In your collection, what would you say your favorite pieces? Not necessarily the most valuable. Doesn't have to be the most valuable or the most rare. What would be the one piece of your collection that just resonates with you personally the most? I don't say nostalgic, but which one resonates with you the most?
Okay, so you talking about just in my games collection, or you're talking about my Sonic collection? Because
you could do both. Let's do both.
Okay. Well, my Sonic collection, that answer is really easy. That one is I have a plush Sonic the Hedgehog from the 90s, basically from Cal Toys, it's a company called Cal Toys. And that plush Sonic the Hedgehog, so the story behind it, I told about this on my YouTube channel, but the story about this is just that, so we were talking about watching the original Sonic cartoons, right?
Yeah.
So down here in Houston, Channel 20, now known as My 20, they used to air The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, which was the weekday Sonic cartoon starring Julia White. It was the madcap, like Looney Tunes style Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon. It's one that it wasn't based off the comic. It was the one that didn't take itself seriously. They ran a contest where if you watched the show for Monday through Friday during 1 week, after the show was over, there was a question for you to answer. And if you answered all of those questions correctly, you send it over by mail to the channel station. And if your letter got picked and you answered all the questions correctly, you won a prize pack. And it came with like temporary tattoos, some stickers, a little balloon, which I still have the balloon. The temporary tattoos are gone. I have no idea where they are. But the one that always resonated the most with me was that plush Sonic. And it just, for some reason, it's stuck with me like my entire time. So that probably is my most prized piece out of my Sonic collection, I would say.
That's
now,
cool.
In my video game collection, that's where it really starts getting hard, because there are multiple things that I really, really hold close. But I think I'm gonna go with my copy of Magic Knight Rare for the Saturn. That's probably gonna be it, mainly because it was the very first like video game gift that my wife ever gave to me. She gave it to me for Christmas one year. And the funny thing is that Magic Knight Rare Earth has never been a cheap game. Like even back in the day, like before retro gaming really became like a big thing, it's never been, as far as like how much it's been worth, it's never been under $100. Like it's always been a pricier game. Now I think it's close to like $1,000, if anything. But yeah, it's stupidly expensive now. But the thing is that it was one that I always told her, like throughout our years of being together. I think this was it was like a year after we got married. So it basically was to where I always said, hey, this game has always eluded me. I've never been able to find it again locally. It's always been kind of out of my grasp. And so this was again after an anime at the Alamo, after another anime night. We went out with our friends and we went to a little place called Steak and Shake. And we were doing our gift exchange at Steak and Shake. And I opened up my gift and I was stunned. And it was beautiful, mint condition. She got it off eBay. Beautiful mint condition Magic Knight Rare for the Saturn.
Wow.
And it hit me really hard. Like I was almost in tears because like she knew, it's like, I'm not even gonna ask how much you paid for this because I don't care. Like this is just it's amazing. Like and this is the one that I think out of anything that's probably still my most cherished piece. It's not the most expensive piece in my collection, but
Sure.
it's the one that I think it really holds the closest to my heart. If not that, it's probably my pack from the 1994 Blockbuster World Game Championship that I was a part of. It's probably that.
So hang on. Back up the truck a second. You were a part of what now?
So yeah, in
1994?
in 1994 and 1995, Blockbuster ran the Blockbuster Video Game Championships, where it was a nationwide competition to where, like, if you qualified at your local Blockbuster, we went into semifinals and finals, and all the way up to like the national championship. In 1994, I competed at the one here. There was a Nintendo side and a Sega side, where it was either Genesis or Super NES. So of course I was on the Genesis side, right?
Right.
And there were the 3 games that you had to play, and each one had either a score challenge or a time challenge. It was Virtual Racing, Sonic 3, and NBA Jam. And the 3 that I did now, I had an ace up my sleeve for Sonic 3. So for Sonic 3, because nobody knew about the trick to get the perfect ring count during the special stages. So when you're doing the Blue Sphere special stages, if you collect all the rings, you get a 50,000 point bonus. Not only do I do it once, I did it twice.
Wow.
So my score was like 80, like 85, 80 something thousand above. Like nobody else could even come close. And what was funny is that after I did it, everybody else tried to do it after and they failed. They didn't even think about that. I was like, yep. And so after winning that, I went to the Texas finals. After that, it was an NBA Jam. I lost my match by 2 points. 2 points. Lost by 2 points.
Man.
But I kept everything that I had. I had my registration card. I had my sign-up sheet. I had my number that they basically pinned onto your shirt. And I have a lapel pin.
Nice.
And all
That's
those
fun.
together, I've kept all of that. That's probably... someday I want to get like a diorama and I want to like hang it on my wall. I haven't done it yet. But I actually really want to do that at some point. But yeah, I probably say it's really between, if I had to pick one piece, it's Rare Earth. But probably everything else, that's a really close second.
That's a really fun memory, and that's a really cool piece. And I love the game story from your wife. I love that because it was clear she knew you. You were known, and she got you something that she knew you would love, and knew that something that only you would enjoy. You know what I mean? Like, that was a very for you gift. That was so sweet. Very cool, man. Good for her. Well done. After all this conversation, have you caught the bug? Are you now interested in collecting retro games and retro consoles? If so, our experts, our pros on this show have some advice for you. I like that you're focusing your collection in on the things that you love. I think that's really interesting, and a lot of the collectors I've been talking to have said the same thing, especially if someone was new to retro collecting, which if you're walking in now, wow, I can't imagine. It's really hard now, right? With the state of the union as it is, with prices and availability and all that good stuff. You know, a lot of the people I've spoken to have said just focus on the things you love that bring you that emotional connection or that nostalgic connection. Would your advice to a new collector be similar?
Yes, absolutely. I'd probably say, if anything, if you're looking into doing retro collecting, first off, now it's kind of a tough time. I'm sure if anybody who's listening to this, like later on, like I'm hoping it's going to get better for new people to kind of jump in, because right now, I mean, just from a pricing standpoint, the entry of jumping in for new people, it's pretty high. I mean, even kind of common stuff is getting a little bit, it's either getting really tough to get, or B, it's getting really pricey. And but I think to anybody that I would say, if you're really just now starting to get into collecting, have a focus and focus on the things that you love, right? So I wouldn't really say trying to collect everything for a full set now is kind of a wise decision, because again, things are getting real pricey. But that's what I say. If it's games that you really cherished when you were younger, or games that you really feel that kind of emotional tie to now is really where you should kind of focus on. And know your tools. Look at sold eBay listings. Use price charting with like a grain of salt or anything like that. Get on different groups in the community to try to see, hey, maybe there's a trade group or whatnot you could do. Maybe there's some local meetups that you could do. Garage sales. I don't know about in Austin, but I know like around here in Houston, garage sales are almost like a thing in the past when it comes to retro games. Like pretty much everybody knows what they're worth, and it's a little bit higher price. So I don't even try anymore.
Yeah.
Well, right now especially I can't. But that's really what I say to everybody. Is just like, utilize those tools and look in. I don't want to really push like Facebook or anything, but Facebook groups are also really a good place to find good deals and whatnot for retro collectors too, or also to trade. I'd say that's always really a good spot too, and always be open for trading. That's really the other thing too. Don't settle just for cash or anything like that. Always be open for trades, because you never know if somebody might have something that you need. Like for example, perfect example, I did a trade with somebody on Instagram a couple of weeks ago. Like I randomly had mentioned about. So are you familiar with a game called Paprium? Have you heard of that?
I'm not, no.
Okay, so it's a TLDR, because it's a long story behind this game. It's a brand new Sega Genesis game that came out in 2020. It was a game that was in development for almost 10 years that finally people thought, was like, oh, we just got ripped off. This game's never going to come out. It finally came out. And I was just like, out of nowhere, like with no fanfare or anything. Oh, people are getting shipped their copies. Okay, it's a beat 'em up in the vein of Streets of Rage. And I said to myself, man, I wanted a copy of this game, but I didn't get in on the initial pre-orders or anything like that, and I'd like to have it. Sure enough, somebody who follows me on Instagram, see, again, going back into the community and being involved in the community.
Yeah.
He messaged me and he's like, hey, I actually have an extra copy of Paprium if you'd like I'll trade you for it. And I was just like, whoa, okay, well, let's talk. And so sure enough, I had a game that he wanted. It was an early copy of Pure Solar, which is another homebrew game made by the same company, made by Watermelon. And it was just a straight trade for trade. And
wow.
It's like, perfect. Now I have it. I've played it. I've streamed it. I'm working on a YouTube video for it. It's a great freaking game. I wish that it would be able to get into the hands of more people. But it's a really great game. But my point is, it's just that, always kind of keep your options open when it comes to collecting too, because you never know if and don't always think about it from a dollar standpoint too. It's like when you're trading, don't ever think about it from I'm not gonna say don't ever, but don't get hung up on the value, quote unquote. Don't get completely hung up on that.
Right. It's not like we're trading baseball players or doing trying to
right.
Right, because that's a very interesting point, right? Because you can get hung up in numbers, how much something is worth as opposed to what you're going to get for it. That's very interesting. That's a good point. Don't get hung up in the numbers. That's interesting.
Perfect example at Classic Game Fest. I made a trade with somebody, and now we've made friends. Like we talk to each other on Facebook and whatnot. So I had a complete in box copy of Alf for the Master System. It's a $400 game, right? It's an expensive game, and the guy, he was just like, man, I really want it. I can't afford it, but maybe I could possibly trade. I was like, well, what do you have for trade? I might be able to do something for you. So it's like literally the only thing that he had was a loose copy of Chrono Trigger for Super NES. And, my buddy actually had tools. So we opened it up. We verified that it is legit. That, by the way, if you're collecting, that's another thing you should do. There's a set of tools on Amazon, or you can get them locally, or however, to open up your cartridges. And however, if you're dealing with expensive carts, open them up and make sure they are legit, because there's a lot of fakes out there.
Oh,
there's a lot of fakes out there. So you have to be careful with that.
Oh, man. It's so scary.
It can be. It can be.
Yeah, wow.
But so we opened up, we verified, and I had to think about it for a second. I was like, man, this game is only worth literally a third of what Alpha's worth. Not even close. But
right.
I had to think about it for a second, and just looking at him, it's I've been trying to get this game for years, man. Especially because it was in mint condition. And I just stopped and thought for a second. I was like, you know what? I'm gonna make your day, because I'm just it's going to a good home. Do I take a little bit of a financial hit? Yeah, I am. But you know what? It's going to a good home, and I definitely made his day. I've made an awesome friend out of it. And again, going back to helping the community. No regrets, period.
That's awesome, man. That's actually a really cool story of being good faith with the community. Kind of like what you were saying is, and just kind of fostering positivity and a spirit of, hey, I'm sure I've wanted something at some point that someone else had. And maybe you had that experience where someone helped you out. Like, hey, I know we're not trading one for one as far as value goes, but I can tell you really love this thing. go ahead and have it. And I think that's really cool, man. That's cool. You made a friend, and you kind of gave the retro collecting community a good name right there. That's awesome. That's cool stuff,
Thank
man.
you. Thank
That's a
you.
good story. One quick thing I want to go back to, I did have the question written down, but I forgot to ask it. You for the retro collecting, you've been collecting for about 10 years. How has things changed between 10 years ago and now, as far as the retro collecting community and availability, and of course pricing is always a big thing right now. Like how has that scene evolved over the last 10 years?
It has gotten crazy. That is that is the best thing I can say for it. So when I started collecting again, yeah, it was it was starting to pick up steam, sort of retro game collecting, but you could still find games at rummage sales and stuff, good ones like NES games. Like I picked up my Mega Man collection there. Somebody had all of them, and I was just like, yeah, I'll take those. And they were cheap too. I think he wanted like $5 or $10 per cartridge.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, great. So you used to be able to find those kind of things, and it may be different in other areas. You might still be able to find those things, but I'll tell you now. No, if I find anything at a garage sale, it's like a Microsoft joypad from 1984 or something like that. Like it's never anything good. All of that stuff, I think people have realized kind of the value of retro games and how it's kind of skyrocketed. Just watching the journey, you could almost see it go through generations, what people were focusing on. Because when I started collecting again, the big thing was NES. Everybody wanted to have that full NES collection, like Pat the NES Punk or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, everybody wanted that full NES set. Nothing else was really catching the world on fire. Yeah, there were a few expensive Super Nintendo games. Earthbound's been expensive for a while now. But in general, things were still pretty calm outside of the NES, and then it moved to the Super Nintendo, and then prices kind of skyrocketed there. N64 after that got really popular again, and right now GameCube games are stupid valuable. I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, Code Veronica X, for instance, it's a Resident Evil game, fairly common. On the GameCube, it's worth almost $200 now.
What?
Yeah.
What?
I'm not even kidding.
This is crazy.
That's
Something's
what I
got to give.
That's what I mean. The market is going crazy right now, and I don't understand why. I mean, to a certain amount, you got to thank Corona for this.
Sure.
A lot of people being stuck inside, they think, they start remembering, oh yeah, I used to love video games. I want to play Super Nintendo again, or whatever it is. And they go out and they hunt games down. I remember for the longest time there during our quarantine, my game shop, when they did reopen with mask requirement and everything, the inventory was nil. There was nothing there, except really common, of course they still had 50 copies of Madden 94, because who doesn't? But all the good stuff was always gone, even the basic good stuff like Super Mario Brothers. Normally a game store would have like 10 copies of Mario Duck Hunt sitting on the shelf, and they were always out. You couldn't find anything, and I think that contributed to it. But also just in the last 10 years, we've also seen the rise of digital content creators being more prolific. So when a popular YouTuber or streamer plays an old game, suddenly that's in demand, and the price skyrockets. Another good example of that is like Home Improvement for the Super Nintendo. Terrible game. This is the worst game ever. I picked it up at a gaming convention years ago because it was Home Improvement for the Super Nintendo.
Sure, right.
We need to see what this is about.
Of course.
But then I believe it was JonTron did an episode on it, and now the game's worth like $90.
Yeah, see, that's crazy.
And so yeah, that has done it too. AVGN, Game Grumps, all those creators, they drive up these game prices when they play something and make a good episode. So I mean that's kind of cool to see from a gamer's perspective that content creators are making things that resonate so well with people that they want to go out and get these things. But at the same time, it's really making the collector's market kind of silly right now.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And as you were talking, I was also thinking maybe people now have the people who grew up with these games are now have disposable income in which they can relive that childhood.
True.
Where maybe 10 years ago they didn't. They're now, I'm obviously 40, and I definitely have more disposable income now than I did when I was 30 or 25. So
Right.
I could see myself getting into like, hey, let me try this hobby out and having the means to collect some of these things and pick up some of these things. But some of these prices are just outlandish, like $90 for Home Improvement.
Yeah.
That's
why? Why?
Infamously bad game, but that's probably what it is, right?
Yeah.
It's an infamously bad game, right? So
It's so bad that it's now good.
I find that very interesting because it's such an attractive thing, because you are reliving your childhood and also just picking up these really cool artifacts, and
Yeah.
preserving as well, right?
Right, yeah, things that you heard of and never got a chance to. Like, there's a full motion video game for the PS1 called Brain Dead 13 that I thought looked really cool because it was like fully animated and everything like that, and it looked like a Saturday morning cartoon. Never got a chance to play it, but a couple months ago I found it in a shop again. Of course, it was stupid price, but still.
Sure.
It's still really cool to be able to be like, oh, I remember reading that in GamePro, and then, picking it off the shelf and be like, finally, I can play this.
Yes, great.
Yeah, this
Does it
thing
have
I've forgotten about for like 15 years. I have it now.
Does it have a 4.0 fun factor? Let's find out.
Right, with the little heads with the hair and everything. Oh,
Yep.
I remember that so clearly. The little color-coded backgrounds and everything. Oh,
Yeah,
man.
yeah. From sad face to mind blown hair
Yep.
is now spikes. Red background spikes.
Yep.
Oh, my man.
Oh, man.
Cool, man. We've heard from the collectors, so now let's talk to the person on the other side of the counter. After the break, we talk with David Colleen of Game Over Video Games here in Austin, Texas, as he shares his thoughts on the current state of retro collecting. Before we get started with side B of the show, I wanted to put out a quick disclosure on the interview you're about to hear. I have a relationship with David Colleen. I've covered his stores in articles I've written for the blog I write for here in Austin. I've covered his Classic Game Fest for a few years running now. So I know David, and we're not friends, I would say, but we're definitely pals. And I love what he's doing with his stores, with his conventions, and he has a real heart for the actual games and for the community. He really does, and he's a good dude all around. So I don't want this interview to sound like a commercial for Game Over, because that's not the intention, but I definitely want to share that I do have a working relationship with David, and but that is not going to color any of my opinions, nor is it going to color the interview as a whole. I come from the blogging world. Disclosures are a big deal there, so I just want to put that out. Let's join the conversation. Before we get started with kind of the meat of the conversation, I'd love to learn a bit more about you, kind of just some background information about you and your entry point into video games and your fandom.
Okay. Well, yeah, no, I'm 45, and so I've been playing video games pretty much since the beginning. I started with an Atari as video games were just kind of becoming a big, home entertainment thing, and so I've always been kind of a casual gamer. Nothing too hardcore or serious, but I've always played them throughout my whole life, and kind of grew up with the industry. Always having to kind of sell the old one to get the new one, just because everything was so expensive back then. So I never really had a huge collection, but I was always playing something, over the years. And then, fast forward to adulthood, and, I used to have a job as a store manager for EB Games, if you remember EB Games in the mall.
Oh, yeah.
And so that was pretty cool. I've worked a lot of retail and sales jobs, and so after running that store, I actually took like a year off to be a stay-at-home dad for a while, and after that, when I decided to go back to work, instead of going back, to either there or to, some other similar type business or just a retail job in general, I'd always wanted to have my own business. And so, I've always loved video games, always wanted to have my own business. So I just kind of put those two things together and,
Sure.
went that route and started my own, little game shop, and it was very small. It was literally a one man operation. Um, and, and yeah, I mean, it's, grew out of my, kind of love of of the industry of the, the history of video games. And it came at a time when like GameStop had just bought EB Games. They were becoming the Goliath, company that they are, or I guess were a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
When they were buying everybody out. So it was either, they
Right.
ran them out of business or bought them and put them out of business that way. But GameStop was very big, very powerful, and was shutting everything else down basically. And they were getting rid of all the old school games. And, to me, who is a lifelong fan of video games, and my favorites are the ones that remind me of my childhood in the 80s. I hated to see that go. And so, they had those big, like, dump bins out in front of the GameStop stores, and clearance bins, and games at that point were like everywhere, and, Goodwills, and, everywhere around town. And I was like, I'm going to start just scooping all these up. And that's going to be my store focus, is going to be the older games. So it'd be more of a complementary business to GameStop than competitive.
Right.
But yeah, little did I know that, and at that time, retro gaming wasn't really a thing. It wasn't really a hobby. There were people like me that did it, but it wasn't anywhere near the size and scope of what it is now.
Exactly. Yeah.
It was just some guys that just kind of like, getting some of the old games, and it was a very small, part of the market, I guess. But then, my little hobby shop, of one, run by me, started to grow, and the hobby started to grow, and we basically just grew with it. So over the years, we started, adding staff and adding more locations, and then we expanded, throughout Texas, and then now we even have stores up in Washington, around the Seattle area, and so we've just started kind of growing, little by little. It seems like a lot now looking back, but really it was just little by little. Just every year, we'd add like a new store somewhere, and just grow a little bit, add a couple more employees, and yeah. So now, we're all throughout Texas and in Washington. We have 12 total retail stores, and then plus we have the online store at gameovervideogames.com, and so we can sell either from the retail or from the website to basically anywhere in the country. And as you know, obviously retro gaming is huge now, especially compared to what it was. So yeah, aside from maybe the past year and a half, it's been pretty nice to us.
Yeah.
It's
No,
been a
I
good
can
business to be
imagine. Yeah, and I can imagine it's such a huge part of the landscape now, right? And when did you kind of start breaking up? What year was that when you started kind of breaking off into your own venture?
Game Over Video Games first opened in 2005.
Okay.
So this is
Wow.
this is year 16 that I've been doing this.
Wow, that's crazy. Wow.
So which
That's
seems like
awesome.
forever, but
It does.
but it really
Yeah.
kind of it kind of flew by, and so like I said, we have 12 stores, so it's kind of like one store a year. Sometimes we'd have maybe two or three in some of the real peak years. But then yeah, I mean the past 2 years have been kind of a nightmare, and as it has
Yeah.
been for everybody. I mean, I'm not alone
Sure.
in that, for sure. That anybody who is involved with either working at, or specifically people that own retail stores, had a really bad year last year.
Yeah.
And unemployment and stores closing everywhere, and it's just been, awful.
Yeah.
So luckily, now today, mid 2021, things are definitely back on track, and people are back out, and, people are getting vaccinated, and it's, as close to normal life as we've been in quite a while. So that's good.
It's very interesting you mentioned how it still resonates. I think about it sometimes. Obviously we're in an era of gaming where, we have more options. There's more stuff to play than we'll ever play in our lifetimes. Like
Right.
we cannot ingest the amount of content that's out there in the world now. And of course, everything's the latest and the greatest, and that's fine, right? Some of these games nowadays are fantastic experiences. But people are so gravitated to the world of retro. It's interesting. Why do you think that has made such a resurgence over the last few years?
I don't know. I mean, on a basic level, I guess, games have become, so complex, and graphics so crisp and so realistic and lifelike. And, honestly, what what I feel most people want with the video game experience is an escape from normal life. You don't want to be watching a movie. You want to be playing a game. And so, the more lifelike it gets, and where they have, like Hollywood actors, playing in the game
Sure.
and stuff
Yeah.
like that. To me, that's less of an arcade gaming type experience and more of just a, like a Netflix or watching a movie type experience. And, the old games, it's not that they were all easy. Just because the graphics were simple, you had to kind of use your imagination, and you had to, sometimes you only had a few weapons, or, just run and jump, and that's all you could do. It was much more challenging than going into a game now where it's, has cinematic scenes that sometimes you're sitting there for 10 minutes, just, wondering, when do I get to push another button and play the game? Because
Right.
I'm just watching this show, and that's cool, and the graphics are nice, but,
Yeah.
I like to be able to jump in and out of a game. As an adult, I don't have as much free time, and I want it to feel like a true gaming experience. And to me, gaming, it is retro, it is arcade style, kind of button mashing to a point, but
Sure.
but not without thought. Just that it needs to be simple to pick up, but hard to complete. And so now I think games are very hard to pick up, but simple to complete, if that makes any sense.
No, it does, and it also there is certain kind of beauty in the simplicity, right? Because I think you make a very good point about escape. How I do think it's more than nostalgia. I think nostalgia only gets a industry or a type of game so far, where I think that there's almost a lack of abstraction. That kind of what you're talking about, where it's a Hollywood actor, it's a recognizable voice, it's this realistic depiction. It's getting too close to real, where I think a lot of games, and the beauty of games is that abstraction, is that it is different. So you make some really good points about that. That's an interesting way of looking at it, where maybe we just need something a little simpler in a complex world, right? Not to get too heady about it, but
yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, and obviously, I mean, you and I have the nostalgic, impact that
Sure.
that drives us back there. But I mean, I can tell you just from running Game Over, like today, that people collect retro games and play retro games that are a lot younger than us, and so
Oh, yeah.
they don't have nostalgia at all. So they literally come into a current gen game and a retro game kind of with a clean slate. And so there's no nostalgia drawing them to one versus the other, but some of them are still drawn to the retro games. And so, there's got to be some appeal beyond just the nostalgia, that sometimes you do want a game that's fun and light and easy to get in and out of, and just more relaxing and less serious than some of these like M-rated, Hollywood actor, current gen games, where it's just so difficult sometimes to pick it up and play. And for young kids, it's easier to just pick up a game where, okay, you run, you jump, up, down, left, right. That's all easy. Like, I get it. And you can pick it up and play right away without any kind of training or strategy guide or, anything like that. You can just pick it up and go.
And what's really cool about a store like yours is you're guaranteed everything's going to work, right? That risk is pretty much gone. And if I'm wrong, I'll just cut this bit out, but I'm pretty sure you can try most of the things you have in store as well if you wanted to just give it a spin. Yeah.
Yeah, and so that's the benefit of, I mean, obviously, I represent Game Over Video Games, but other retro gaming stores like us are out there too, and it's, the benefit of buying in store in person. I know at our stores we do this. You can try any game out to see if you like it, to make sure it works. You can look at it. You can hold it in your hand. Look at the backside of it. Look at the label. Look at the corners of the box. You can actually have it in your hand, give it a once over. Try it out, and make sure it's the thing you want to buy before you buy it. And so we've taken it in from customers. They almost never come in nice and neat and pretty. We have to, clean them up,
Sure.
refurbish them, clean out the console, the teeth on the cartridges and the consoles and everything. And, so we put all that effort in, from having the store in general, paying rent and utilities and whatnot. You have employees that we pay basically to stand there all day cleaning dirty, nasty stuff.
Yeah.
And so they do that all day. And then we get it into this sellable condition. And then you can see it and experience it and demo it in the store, test it out. And then we have a 14-day return policy, that's exchange policy really. So we don't do refunds, but like in 14 days, if it doesn't work, you can even bring it back and we'll just swap it out. So your ability to find the stuff is way better. You get it in a better shape. You have the security of knowing that what it's going to look like, and that you can, if it doesn't work out when you get home, you can bring it back.
Right.
And then, you pay for that though, because that's where like the evil retail overhead comes in.
Sure.
Because to do all that cost us money. And so,
Yeah.
If you buy randomly from some dude on eBay, that's selling out of, a barn in Kansas or something, like that's cool, but you may get what you pay for there. But from us, you get the air conditioned store, you get the games
Nice.
clean, you get to try it out, you get the warranty in case it doesn't work when you get home. But you pay a premium for that. So there's definitely an advantage to coming into, I'll put a plug for Game Over, coming into our
Sure.
stores, but also other retro stores. I mean, I always love to support, anybody that's doing what we do, because I always think that in-person, retail and in-person, relationships, and transactions and everything, in person is better than online. I'm a firm believer in that. And it may be just because of my age or whatever, like online is
No.
great and you can do a million things online. It's fantastic. It's amazing. I wouldn't change that, but it's not everything. And the people that think it is everything are really missing out, because, there's a lot to be gained in this life and in this world and this country and in your own town, wherever you live, by actually going out and doing stuff and talking to people and buying things in person and supporting those local businesses where, my kids go to school in the Austin area, and, so we support local PTA and stuff like that. And
Right.
if you're buying from somebody who just lives, in their parents' house and is selling on eBay, I mean, you're not supporting those local people. And then when you need something locally, like, oh crap, now I need my controller broke, I got to run out and get one. I don't have time to wait for one to be shipped to me. I need to go get one now.
Right.
If you don't support those game stores like us, I mean, someday, we'll be gone. And then you won't be able to get that cord or that controller or that game on a whim. You'll have to wait for the online, shipping. So I'm a big supporter of, people supporting their local businesses, small and indie video game stores as much as possible. And, it really goes a long way to not only, benefit you and your community, but also the retro gaming community at large that really depends on all these stores existing. We have 12 stores, and Game Over, as far as the small, retro market is concerned, we're pretty big, but we're not everywhere. There's 48 states
Right.
we're not in. And so whoever is in those 48 states, doing retro gaming, I want you to support them too. Go into your local store.
Yeah, exactly.
And because, if we stop supporting local businesses and local, the people that run them, and stop, giving them our money, then pretty soon, every town is just they're going to lose not only stores, but restaurants and families, and that money all goes into a good place and supports, good people doing cool things and providing employment and, supporting the hobby. And not just trying to make a buck, but actually we have boots on the ground. We, brick and mortar is we're committed to this hobby. This isn't a whim. This isn't something I'm just doing on the weekends to get some extra cash. Like we're invested
Right.
in the retro collecting gaming market.
Yeah.
So yeah, we need to support much more than the dude in Kansas or whatever that's just selling.
Well, and that's and as you know, in my other life at the Austin, we're 100% about local businesses and supporting local stores and restaurants and things like that. Listen, eat, buy local.
Yeah.
One of the cool things I think about going to, let me back up a little bit. If COVID has taught us anything, I think it's taught people one of two things. Either they like online way more than they don't need people, or if you're like me, wow, I really need to be in community with people. Like this whole being by myself, sitting in one place, basically on Twitter, which can be a disaster in itself. Being in person for me is great, because one of the most fun things about going to a store like yours is just chatting with the person behind the counter about games. Like,
Exactly.
looking at the
Yeah.
games, checking out some of the stuff, making a purchase, if the right game is there, and just having that opportunity to sit there for 10, 15 minutes, of course, if they can, and just talking games and being in that community. And I've always felt that at least your stores have always tried to foster that community, which is very difficult to do on an online space and an online marketplace. It's very transactional, where
Yeah.
an in-person experience is very personal and very connected. So I'm with you, man. For me, COVID taught me how much I do value people, even though there are some wonderful benefits to working from home and, being able to take Zoom meetings in my pajamas. There is a tangible benefit to also just being with people. So I'm really glad that stores exist and that marketplace exists, for sure. I want to segue a bit into kind of the retro collecting scene. As you mentioned earlier, you started out collecting by basically kind of just going through used game bins and Goodwills and just kind of amassing these games organically, through kind of people just doing what you used to do, which was sell games as you needed to buy new ones, right?
Yeah.
How has that? Obviously, that's changed quite a bit over the years. How has that scene not only changed, but how has it stayed the same? How is what's the connective tissue between the way it used to be when it was just kind of hunting for games, as opposed to now, where it's much more of a buyer/seller driven marketplace?
Yeah, it's definitely changed a lot over the years. I mean, when we started Game Over Video Games, in 2005, retro gaming really wasn't a thing yet. It wasn't real huge yet, and you could go out to just about any thrift store, Goodwill or local thrift store in any town, go to their electronics section, and you'd see, some kind of random old video games, just kind of stacked up on the shelf there, not even locked up in a glass case. It was just, out with like the toys and stuff, or the electronics. And, over the years, as it's become more and more popular, for the most part, those kind of places, they just don't exist anymore. I mean, thrift stores and Goodwills are still there, obviously, but they never get video games, like retro video games. And if they do, they normally either sell them online, or do it through like one of their auctions, and they sell it for basically like the retail price that I'd be selling it for in a Game Over store. So it makes no sense to most people to buy them that way anymore. The selection is gone, and the price advantage is also gone. So that part of it's kind of sad. But the games are still out there. It's just the hunting, there's slimmer pickings, out there. And so, you have to go to a lot more places to find fewer games, and the prices are going to be higher than, you're either used to or you'd like them to be.
Sure.
So it's a tougher thing to do right now. Somebody starting today and says, I want to collect, every game ever made for the NES or for PS1 or something. It's like, you better have a lot of money and a lot of time, because, even Game Over, even with 12 stores, like, we're not going to have that many games, for an entire collection. They're spread out so thin throughout the country now. And a lot of people that own them, they're no longer buying and selling as much. They're buying and keeping them all. And so not only are they not making them anymore, but even the ones that were on the market, say 10 or 20 years ago, are now no longer on the market. So stores like us, like retail stores, like we have to, search harder to get games for the store. We have to pay more than we used to pay for them. And then when we sell them, obviously rent and payroll and stuff like that goes up too over the years. And so it's now we got to sell them for more. And so it's not a cheap hobby anymore. And that part of it is, something that's kind of lost. I think the desire is out there. The thrill of the hunt is still appealing, and you can sometimes, score really great deals, either at our stores, at other stores, online, and in local thrift stores or pawn shops. But it's more the exception than the rule that you're going to, find some kind of, amazing deal that somehow nobody else bought and it's some kind of super low price.
Right.
Like that just doesn't really happen anymore.
Yeah, and you think it's just more of just a symptom of the demand? Is that really kind of what it is? It's just demand's gone up, so the price has gone up. Because a lot of things you'll hear from the retro collecting scene, and I've heard this from friends who are relatively serious collectors, is they bemoan the price of these things. You'll go on eBay and you'll find, an original Chrono Trigger without the box for $150, right?
Yeah.
And it's like.
At
And,
least.
and that's hard for like you said, people who are trying to get into the hobby and trying to do that. But to your mind, as someone who's a retailer, it's just kind of unfortunately a supply and demand situation.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, most things in life,
Right.
ultimately come down to supply and demand. I mean, people don't like to think of the different parts of their life as businesses, but it's always a business to somebody. And,
Sure.
The price goes up as the demand goes down, and things like retro games that, are no longer made or not significantly made. There's some, remakes and things like that, homebrews and stuff that's coming out.
Right.
But the classics, the old original Nintendo stuff and the original like Sega stuff, like they're not making them anymore. And
Right.
so, and the people that used to buy and sell them to get the next new thing or whatever, like they don't buy and sell as much anymore. They still do, but not as much. And so, stores like us, I mean, we have to search high and low to find this stuff, and
Mhm.
and we end up paying a premium for it. And so,
Sure.
and then we, find out what they're selling for on eBay or, price charting or whatever. And like, sometimes it even shocks me what this stuff sells for. And,
Right.
because I want to have games and I want to play games. I don't want to spend a fortune on games. And so, and that's just I guess the tough situation that retro gaming is in right now, because there's more interest than ever, but the supply is lower than ever, and the demand and the pricing is higher than ever. So it's hard for all of us. It's hard for the stores to keep customers happy. It's hard for the customers to find what they need. It's nobody wins when a supply demand curve is so out of whack.
Yeah, and to your mind, it does seem a little out of whack.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've been doing this, 16 years now, and it's,
Yeah.
we used to buy, games for, a couple of bucks, sell them for like 5 or 6, and it's, and that's basically doubling our money. And that was great, but now, I mean, we can barely buy games for, a couple of bucks each. I mean, we're paying, 5, 10, 20, 50, whatever, depending on the game to get stuff.
Sure.
And then for us to flip it, of course, it's got to go up from there. And even though we still try and, price, we try and go like between like price charting and eBay. So it's like we try and go,
Okay.
where it's a fair price, where it's not the most expensive way to get that game, but it may not also be the cheapest place to get that game. But it's a fair price for both, fair price for seller and buyer for what the market is.
Right.
But even then, it's tough. Like I said, it's tough to have enough games in stock, that we can have, decent, selection in our stores. It's a constant challenge to keep the shelves full.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And again, it's like you said, it's kind of just a symptom, or seems like a symptom of just the marketplace and where it's at. But it does sound like you try to stay fair, because there are some things you see out there. And of course, I spent some time on Twitter. You know how Twitter can be.
Yeah, Twitter hates everybody.
Right? Twitter don't like anybody. Twitter can be very unreasonable. But you'll see somebody post like, "Oh my God, they're charging again $150 for a Chrono Trigger." I suspect just because people are selling it for that doesn't mean people are actually paying for it, right? That's usually the symptom of that piece. So it sounds like you guys try to stay as fair as possible, which I think, given the current circumstance and scenario, or sorry, not scenario, but landscape. It sounds about it. You're doing the best you can.
We do the best
situation.
we can. And obviously, we have stores and we have overhead and we pay our people, our employees
Sure.
and stuff. So it's not just like me and my games anymore. It's like, there's overhead to pay. So, about half of the price of every, thing that we sell is just running the business. It's not profit. It's not, anything that goes into my pocket. It's just keeping the lights on and the doors open.
For sure.
And so it's a constant challenge to keep it going like that. But I still love what I do, and I'll keep doing it as long as we can. But it is always a challenge, to keep that supply demand curve as even and fair as possible. Because if the prices are so high, nobody can buy a game from us. That's bad. We don't sell anything. We go out of business. If the prices are too low and collectors come in and literally clean us out of everything, then the next person comes into an empty store and then we're out of business. So, so it's like, we're damned if we do, damned if we don't, but we try and be kind of fair in the middle where, a lot of retro gaming, it's not impulse buy priced anymore. You can't just get like, well, I'm just going to get my third copy of Mario 3 because it's only $2 or whatever. Like, that's not going to happen anymore. You're going to have to be more selective, and the games you really want, you're going to have to pay that premium for. But the ones that's a duplicate copy or that you're the kind of meh, games that aren't that big a deal, you're going to have to just let those go, because getting the entire collection for a certain console is just, it's too tough and too time consuming and too expensive these days. So I always tell people, like, pick the games that you remember, that you love, go after those, because at the end of the day, you want stuff that you're actually going to play.
No, it's cool. So, in your kind of going back to kind of your journeys of the first forays into collecting retro games, was there any like great gets? Like, would you have any scenarios where you went to a thrift store or Goodwill or something along those lines, or a pawn shop, and found like that, oh man, I can't believe this is X amount of dollars find? Did it ever happen for you?
Wow. I know I found a lot of deals back in the day at thrift stores. I don't recall anything just uber crazy good deal. But even just finding like a Nintendo or Super Nintendo with a bunch of games, if it was in really good shape, that would be a great find. Just without the like the rental stickers and without a bunch of dirt and crud on all the stuff. And sometimes that would happen, if you would time it right and you just show up as they just put stuff out, and maybe somebody had just basically dumped their whole collection on Goodwill. It did happen. I don't recall a certain game. But yeah, no, I definitely remember driving around to a lot of thrift stores and things, and sometimes it'd be kind of a bust and wouldn't come home with much, and then sometimes you'd have a box full of goodies. But it was the luck of the draw, and again, it's that the value of time too, because as you start to get older and you have like in my case, have a business to run and have two kids at home, and the options to not only play games are limited, but the options to spend like 8 hours in my car driving around all over town.
Sure.
Just for the hope that you might find something, not knowing what it is or how much you'll actually find, just to like drive around in the car all day. I don't have that kind of time anymore, and most people, I think, don't have that kind of time anymore. So that's part of the other reason that the game prices have gone up. It's just the time value of your free time. People don't want to do that. They want it just spoon fed to them. Like, here's all the games, and they're all ready and waiting for you, and super cheap and clean and warranted and everything. And it's almost impossible to meet those kind of expectations nowadays.
No, that makes a perfect sense. And actually, it's interesting, as you were talking, I was about how you drive around town and kind of mine for those great deals, or mine for those lots, the Super Nintendo with 20 games, that kind of deal. I think one of the benefits of modern day gaming or collecting, or just the hobby in itself, is the fact that it's online. And it's kind of widened your search area. So you're no longer limited to, Central Texas. You can go and search anywhere for these things. So even if it's more expensive, the thing you want, if you're willing to pay for it, is most likely out there. It just depends on how much you're willing to fork over for that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything is still out there. So anybody that's looking for any retro gaming console, game title, regardless of the condition, if you're a mint in box or sealed in box collector, they're all out there. But you just won't find them randomly anymore, and you won't find them, around your hometown most times. You're going to have to go to the stores like us that actually like procure them and clean them and package them and sell them in a retail setting, or you're going to have to go online. And but they are still out there. It's just the hunting has shifted a lot to online. But unfortunately, some of the, I guess the fun of the hunt, is not as much, I don't think, when you're shopping online. And then obviously you got the risk and buyer beware kind of, mentality that rules out there. The deals can be found, but they're just not like they used to be.
We're getting close to time. I just wanted to give you just a little space to. You've actually covered this pretty much, but maybe just some last advice for anybody who's looking to start a retro collection. We've covered this, but maybe kind of a space to kind of chat about that, and really anything else you want to share before we closed up.
Okay, sure. Well, yeah, I mean, I still love and will always love retro gaming, and I think I will always want to have at least a small amount of retro games in my house, just for that chance encounter that I have the time to go, get in some time there. So it's a great hobby. The classic games, they're good for kids. Most of them are not, mature rated, or even if they are, it's not anything like mature rated now.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, I remember the uproar over Mortal Kombat, and now you look at that and it's like you can give a little kid Mortal Kombat and not even think twice about it.
Nope.
but I mean, it's a great hobby. It's something that we need to preserve and continue. And so if you're getting into it now, I say great, definitely support, stores like Game Over, who are out there, every day trying to, pound the pavement, bringing the good games, into the stores and having them available for you. But also, like you said, just to support the community and just being someone to talk to suggest, other games like, oh, I like Contra, but, you can almost never find Contra these days and it's super expensive. So then we can start suggesting other games that are kind of like that. And, I guess they have that somewhat suggestive selling, online on some websites, but it's not the same as talking to a person in the store where you can actually get going about, oh, you like shooter games. Okay, well, there's some cool like shoot 'em ups on, Genesis, and the conversation just kind of naturally evolves into other games that you might like in a way that algorithms and online, websites and suggestive, things on eBay or something wouldn't really necessarily pick out.
That's great.
But I just say go into retro collecting with patience. No store like Game Over is going to have everything. I mean, I'd like to say that we do have everything, but and we have a hell of a lot, but we don't have everything. And the selection changes daily. And so, if you don't find it, in our store today, come back tomorrow. If you don't find it then, come back next week. If you don't find it then, look online or check another local store. But the stuff's out there. It just takes a lot of patience and persistence. And you have to be flexible on either the specific consoles, games, titles that you want, or on the amount of money you're willing to spend to acquire them. Because, gone are the days when you can find everything everywhere and it's all, reasonable or cheap prices. So you kind of have to be willing to give some of that up, and you give up, selection, you give up price, or you give up the specific titles. But if you're flexible and you're patient and, you go into it with the intent of having fun and playing the games, you'll come out of it a lot happier. The people that we talked about earlier, the mean Twitter people, they're the ones that they only want certain games in certain conditions, and they just expect, every store to just have stacks of them just waiting for them and have, super low prices on them. And it just doesn't really work that way. I mean, I wish it did, but that's a dream scenario that just doesn't exist. And so you have to be kind of realistic when you go into it, that it's a hobby where there's an endless amount of things to buy and play and collect. But there is going to be some difficulty in finding them. And so you have to be patient with the stores, the people, the cost, and all that to acquire them. But yeah, I definitely recommend doing it. I think retro games are, in my opinion, more fun than, most current games today. And it's definitely an important part of any gamer's, collection to have at least something retro for the times that the mood does strike you to go retro.
While putting together this extra long episode, I've listened to it 3 times. And each time I ask myself, what did we learn that we already didn't know? And my fear is nothing. Maybe this ended up like the end of Burn After Reading, where the FBI agents stare at each other after one of them says, "What did we learn?" And J.K. Simmons answers, "Damned if I know." We get it. It's hard for collectors to fill their collections, it's tough for retailers to stay in business, and the people artificially inflating the prices on eBay and Craigslist are making it brutal for everybody. With the current state of retro gaming, nobody is winning. But what I hope we gained out of this entire episode was a little appreciation, maybe an ounce of understanding, and a recentering of why retro collecting rules in the first place. In the end, it's all about the people, the stories, and the memories those antiquated chips housed in a cheap plastic case can deliver. Maybe the days of collecting every NES game ever made are gone. But what's still surviving, and in some cases thriving, is the heart behind the hobby and the drive to staple together moments of our past, one game at a time. And guess what, friends? Those games are just as fun as they were 30 years ago. Thank you so much for listening to A Gamer Looks at 40. Quick outro. It's been a while. Do all the subscribing, liking, and following every other podcast begs of you. And if you do any of it, start with a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. Truly helps out enormously. Until next time, stay safe, stay kind, and stay awesome.